This is going to be a chaotic video, and it hurts me to say it as a pedant with a penchant for perfectionism, but there, now that I said it, I feel better. So, Damshui, or Damzui, I guess I'll have to settle on one version eventually, but the moment hasn't come yet, is a seaside port town easily reachable from Taipei on the Red Metro line by taking it to the very end. I've been sitting on some cycling footage from Damshui, aka Damzui, and I feel the sudden urge to relieve myself and discharge this material at this very moment, even though it's far from the quality I'd aspire it to be. Why did I even end up cycling in Damshui Zui? That's a great question, because there are really better places to cycle in Greater Taipei. I hope to show you these eventually. I guess I went there because I've already cycled much more in those other places but never really spent much time cycling here, and this trip reminded me why. There is also another reason, namely that Damzui has a new light rail system, or what you might call a streetcar or tram. This one is the second in Taiwan after Kaohsiung. Since I'm a moderate infrastructure nerd, I wanted to see it with my own eyes. A video is forthcoming. Mildly put, this isn't my best ride ever. I don't know the area, didn't really prepare, and it's not one of those places you can just show up and hope for the best. You should know your route in advance, because cycling is only good in very specific places. I mostly didn't, and it shows. Still, I hope you enjoy. Just make sure you have an umbrella ready, as it's about to rain. First, I spent some time digging around the Fisherman's Wharf, where fishing is prohibited according to the sign we just passed, and so is cycling according to another sign which I failed to notice until it was repeated when I was already deep into the pier, at which point I decided to continue my trip anyway, as it would be easier to go forward rather than back. One of the great things about Taiwan is that it doesn't have many tourist traps for foreign tourists. There are some tourist traps for local people though, and this is one of them. It's not nearly as bad as its San Francisco predecessor, but very much in the same spirit. There is a nice bridge though, officially for lovers, but I don't think they check that. Not the worst place to walk around and have fun with friends, I guess, but seriously, don't bring a bicycle here. Usually it's way more crowded than on this rainy weekday. As you're here with me, let me tell you a story. The story is about what to call the place we're in, because, as it turns out, it's far from obvious. What makes Damshui Zui unique is the confused naming, even by the standards of Taiwan, where place name romanization is already a free-for-all, so that's saying something. The indigenous people called the area Hobe. This was Sinicized to Huwei. The Spanish built a fort called Santo Domingo, named after the founder of the Dominican order. The Dutch renamed it Fort Antonio after their compatriot who inadvertently discovered Australia. But eventually some pastor called it Tamsui, then even the Japanese rubber stamped it, and since, as everyone in Taiwan knows, the Japanese can do no wrong, the name stuck. Seriously though, the town luminaries recently decided to adopt Tamsui, or whatever it's pronounced, as its quote-unquote English name, claiming it has some great pedigree, which, as I have outlined, is debatable. Anyway, down they went the path of Côte d'Ivoire and more recently Turkey. The idea to use Taiwanese Minnan as romanization basis is not bad, but you need to have a consistent romanization based on how people actually pronounce the name. Here, it's neither the way it's spelled in Peweji or Tailo, the two common romanization systems for Minnan, partly because it's based on the literary pronunciation few native speakers of Taiwanese Minnan are even familiar with these days. This gives the casual visitor basically zero chance to get the pronunciation right, which in turn means few locals might even understand the name when being asked for directions. We are now going along the newly constructed light rail route. Now, people butcher Hanyu pinyin all the time, but if you do, it's your fault. You could, in principle, read a word right the first time you see it written if you know the relatively straightforward rules, the same for all words. Here, you stand no chance unless you have enough context to know this particular exception. It's not the only situation like this in Sinosphere. If you try asking for directions to Macau in Zhuhai, the city on the other side of the border from it, it's unlikely anyone will understand. That's because in Chinese it's called Aomen or Omun, completely different. The difference is the name for Macau is well established in English, and here we are introducing a new exception to the already complicated toponymy in Taiwan. For me, this goes completely against the utilitarian purpose of assigning names to objects to describe reality and not to redefine it against what it actually is. Taiwanese themselves do not know the special quote-unquote English name for this place, neither do they use the literary pronunciation in Minnan. One can counter-argue that numerous places in the English-speaking world have a weird pronunciation, and that would be correct. But if you go to Bicester, Leicester, Worcester or Gloucestershire, you will find it's the pronunciation the locals themselves use, and there is long history to it. In this case, however, there is no great history to speak of. The name used to be different barely 100 years ago, and for Pete's sake, it just means fresh water. By the way, the whole predicament is even more absurd because there is also a Danshui River whose name is not decided by the local government, so it is consistently romanized in Hanyu Pinyin. Most local people pronounce the name of the river exactly the same as the name of the place, whether in Mandarin or Taiwanese Minnan, yet if you only see it in the Latin alphabet, you might think these two are different and unrelated. Of course, they will call it whatever they like, and my opinion doesn't matter. My point is, since you can choose a name, a good name should reflect reality. If you want a different name, first change the reality, then change the name. End of rant. Going along the seacoast, unfortunately couldn't really see much. And after just a short ride, we find the rest of the coastal route closed. Sad. Let's check out what street-side cycling is like in the completely new area of town, which is in fact called just that, the Danhai New Town. As I see it, there is a lot in terms of infrastructure, but it's very much a hit or miss in terms of consistency and thus the experience. But like I admitted, I don't really know the area and did not prepare in advance, so perhaps it's my fault. What's left for us here in Danshui is its crown jewel, the riverfront. It is actually a part of what's called the Golden Riverbank cycle path, although I would recommend against cycling there most of the time. It's just too crowded, which makes it unpleasant for both cyclists and pedestrians. Still, it should be doable on this rainy weekday. Let's see it. Danshui has its charms, in particular in terms of what's to eat, which I didn't explore here, and it's worth a visit, but based on what I see, I have to conclude it's not particularly bicycle friendly, and I wouldn't recommend cycling here, except along the riverbank from Taipei through Guandu. Once here, leave your bicycle and walk or use public transport. The new light rail is really fun to ride, and I'm going to show you this in the next video. We've reached the red line terminus of the Taipei Metro, and I'm going to call it a day. I wanted to cycle back to Taipei so that I could show you the route, but considering it's raining, it wouldn't make a great video. Another time.